Welcome and thanks for joining us. We're here today ahead of the UN designated World Sickle Cell Awareness Day to celebrate clinical research participation. My name is Dr. Sophie Lanskron and I'm the director of the Sickle Cell Center for Adults at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. I'm also the chair of the Patient Engagement and Education Subcommittee with the American Society of Hematology Research Collaborative. Sickle cell disease is an inherited blood disease that in the United States occurs in about 1 of every 365 Black or African American births. It also affects people of Hispanic and Mediterranean descent. While scientists have known the cause of sickle cell disease for many years, far too few treatments have been developed compared to other genetic diseases, and many people lack access to treatments that could improve the duration and quality of their lives. Fortunately, there have been meaningful steps forward in recent years, and there are many new treatments and advances in the pipeline. The American Society of Hematology RC Sickle Cell Disease Clinical Trials Network was established to help accelerate sickle cell research and improve care for those living with sickle cell disease. Key to those efforts is to elevate the perspectives of the community and highlight the important role individuals living with sickle cell disease play in the research process. I'm really excited to be here today with two amazing individuals who have participated in clinical research and each have incredibly important stories to share and celebrate. Tiana and Tiana, please introduce yourselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tiana Wissington, and I was born with SC disease. But 11 years ago, I participated in a bone marrow transplant clinical research program that ultimately cured me of the physical symptoms of sickle cell disease. And after that time, I participated in various advocacy, publication, and television opportunities. And those opportunities ultimately led me to ASH Research Collaborative, where they were initially starting a clinical trials network to help people living with sickle cell disease make informed decisions about their clinical research options. Really excited to be here today.
Hi, my name is Tiana Wolford. I am 29 years old. I was born with sickle cell disease SS. About 10 years ago, I had a bone marrow transplant and I unfortunately rejected, but so many good things have come out of that. One being that I recently founded my own organization called SC Red, which is the Sickle Cell Reproductive Health Education Directive, and it is the first and only organization to focus on sickle cell and reproductive health, and I am excited to be a part of this conversation.
Great, thank you both. So I have a few questions to ask. Tiana, I'm going to start with you, and then Tiana, if you can weigh in. So how have your different experiences participating in clinical research shaped who you are and what you're doing today?
So I'd say that firstly, I have a profound respect for people who participate in clinical research, especially curative therapies. The protocol that I participated in, there weren't many people who participated before me. I was the 11th adult to participate, so I didn't have a ton of data to suggest that, that I would make it through this process and everything would be okay and I would be cured. There was actually an 80% success rate. So I have a profound respect for people who participate in clinical research. They are brave and they are needed. And I also have respect for researchers who are developing their research questions to help people to be cured of or have a better life living with diseases that that are devastating, like sickle cell. And so how has that affected what I'm doing today? Going through that process, it has, once I was cured and I was doing something totally different for work, I was able to participate in a lot of opportunities to tell my story, to speak with other people who were considering clinical research. And it's, I wanted to do something more to help people living with sickle cell disease. At that moment, about a year or so after I found out that I was cured, it didn't matter what it was. I just wanted to do something where I was working closely with sickle cell disease. And if it wasn't that, I didn't want to do it. And just thankfully, I was giving a talk about the importance of mental health and sickle cell disease, and met the people who were very instrumental in starting the ASH Research Collaborative. I didn't have a ton of experience doing it, but I just took a leap of faith, and that's how my experience led me here. I was able to talk to someone before making the decision to participate in clinical research, to move forward with participating, and it helped my family to garner support for me. And I wanted to do the same thing.
Tiana?
Wow, that's such an interesting question. And I really enjoy being on these platforms with Shauna because we've had such totally different experiences with our curative therapies. Hers was successful and I rejected my transplant. So I think we came out of that with different perspectives. So I can honestly say that after I participated in that clinical trial, it took me a while to kind of get over it because I had just envisioned a different life for myself. And it was really kind of devastating when I didn't get the outcome that I was hoping for. So all these years later, though, I can honestly say that that experience has really pushed me to be the advocate that I am today. And, you know, I learned so much from that. And like Shauna was saying, I think that there was a lack of concern for my mental health during that. And I've really been able to focus on that with advocacy. And obviously something that I regret was not being able to preserve my fertility. So that's also something that I've been able to advocate for in the sickle cell space. But like Shauna was saying, I think it's just incredible for anyone to participate in clinical research. And, you know, I think that my experience could have potentially left me bitter, but it hasn't. And what I realize is that my experience, Shauna's experience, and everyone else who came before us and who will go after us, we need to learn from those people. And so even though my transplant didn't go my way, I think that it was important and that it's really important that we all participate in research like that, because if we don't, we're not going to get the advances that this community deserves.
Remarkable. I think your answers are remarkable and really reflect, right, that I'm talking with two incredible women who took a big leap of faith in enrolling in clinical trials and had two very different outcomes, but are still really just outstanding stories and remarkable for what you've done and how far you both have gone. So the second question is for you, Tiana, and then Shauna. What, in your opinion, are important things to consider when thinking of participating in clinical research, and how do you make that decision?
That's a really good question, Dr. Lansbron. Like I said, I gained so much perspective. And I think what I learned from my journey is it's always important to ask questions. And something that I want to put on the researchers and the doctors is to really work on building a rapport with the patients and make sure that they leave that line of communication open, make sure that questions are asked and that there's transparency. And that I think doctors and patients have to be mindful of kind of the mental toll that participating in research can take, because there are no guarantees. And you have to kind of be able to manage those expectations. So I think that's my big thing is if you're considering participating in trials, make sure that you find a team who you can trust, ask questions, and be mindful of your mental health.
So there's a few things that I think are really important when making the decision. And before I mention that, I'll note that in working with ASH-RC, and just working in the clinical trials realm, there are a lot of things that I was not aware of when I made the decision to participate. And so now there are questions that I would ask, like, what's the research question that this clinical trial is trying to answer? What are the endpoints? And who's affiliated with making those decisions, and the funding, the backing, and on this clinical research. Those are all things that are important to me right now. And I would also ask, how much of my time is going to be involved? Will I still be able to be a productive citizen in my home life, in my work life, with my children, and participate in clinical research? How often will I have to visit the clinic, if at all? Will there be home services available to me? And what support is available? Like Tiana mentioned, mental health is so important, and for so long that has been an area of sickle cell disease that has not been included as total health, as whole health. And so those are the things that I would want to know. Like, are there support services involved, not just with mental health and behavioral health, but are there things available to help mitigate the cost of participating, transportation? How are all of these things going to be, will these things be addressed? And so to answer the second part of that question, how did I make my decision, the decision to participate? It was really tough. It was really tough because, like I said, there weren't hundreds of people who went before me to do this. And I made the decision to do it knowing that it was possible that I wouldn't be cured. It was even possible that I would not make it through that clinical trial because it was so invasive and such cutting edge technology. But I figured that regardless of the outcome, my participation would be helping people who came after me. So I humbly decided to do that. But that was my decision. But I needed a support system. I needed, people to be there for me because I wasn't able to be there for myself throughout a lot of these procedures. And my family wasn't really on board with me participating initially because it was invasive, and I was doing an amazing job at being a career patient, actually. But I spoke with someone who participated in the protocol previously, and they helped to garner support with my family. And I just had total trust in my care team, and my medical care team, and my research team. I believed in what they were trying to do, and they had proven their support for me well before I decided to participate in the program. And so those are all of the things that factored into me making the decision, and the important questions that one should ask when participating in clinical research.
As the physician who often has to talk to patients about research, having someone who asks all the right questions makes me feel more comfortable that they're making a decision that's really based on knowledge about the study and that they've really thought it through. So I really can't agree with you more that asking all of those really important questions is key to feeling more comfortable, but making me feel more comfortable about the decision that my patients are making to participate in the studies. So we've talked a little bit about why you decided to participate in the studies that you did, but I was hoping we could talk a little bit about what you think needs to happen to break down some of the barriers to clinical research participation. And Shauna, do you want to go first here?
Oh yeah, this is a really important one. So I think that, and I can't speak for everyone, but just based on, advocacy and working with ASHRC and having, focus group sessions and meetings and things with the community, I think that it's safe to say that the community is willing to participate in clinical research programs, but there are some huge barriers to participation in standard of care for sickle cell disease is a glaring one. The experiences of people living with sickle cell disease in emergency room care, a lot of people living with sickle cell disease utilize emergency rooms a lot because the pain crises and things that are experiences are situations that require immediate care, urgent care, infusion centers, and things of that nature. Thankfully, there are a lot of institutions and amazing doctors who have mastered this and who understand that this is an important part of the perception of people living with sickle cell disease. But there are a lot of people who don't have very positive experiences. And because they don't have those positive experiences in the emergency room and with their doctors and in other areas of medical care, they are hesitant to participate in clinical research because to them that's more risky than just going to the emergency room. So we have to address the standard of care with sickle cell disease, compassionate care, seamless transition from pediatric to adult care for sickle cell disease. These are all things that would greatly help people living with sickle cell disease feel better about participating in clinical research. And then there's education, educating the potential participants about their rights in participating, about the things that they need to know, some of the questions that I asked previously, the support mechanisms that are available to them, how they're going to, to be able to participate and stay enrolled in the clinical research programs. That's very important. Involving for the clinical researchers and the medical staff, involving people who are potential participants and their caregivers in the implementation, the development and implementation in clinical research is important, because then you're creating programs that are of interest to the community. So it's more likely that they will enroll and stay enrolled in those clinical research programs. And then also just providing education, not only to the potential participants, but to the healthcare professionals. In some of these focus group sessions, a lot of people mentioned that they were never approached by their doctors about participating in clinical research. They found out online or through a friend. And so educating the doctors and making it so that they are comfortable with normalizing the discussion of clinical research, not just with their patient population, but also with other doctors within their institution who are more knowledgeable about clinical research. I think all of those things are very important to overcoming barriers to participating in clinical trials.
That's a great list, Shauna, of really important things that we all need to overcome to help people feel more comfortable participating. So this next question is for you, Tiana. What, in your opinion, are important things to consider when thinking of participating in clinical research, and how do you make that decision?
So I think that when we're talking about barriers to clinical trial participation, there's kind of a specific conversation that we have to have about the sickle cell community and the history, because just historically, as a race in clinical trials, we have not been treated well. But then as sickle cell patients, even to this day, on a day in and day out basis, sickle cell patients are stigmatized and not really necessarily treated as well as they deserve by the medical community. So there is a barrier of mistrust and skepticism on the patient side. And then if we can get beyond that, I think that there are just regular everyday life barriers that maybe sometimes researchers don't take into consideration, which Shauna was kind of alluding to earlier, that we have real lives, and a lot of us, we lead organizations and work full-time jobs and we raise families. So there's already a fear for a lot of us that at any time sickle cell will creep up and disturb our everyday routine. So a lot of times it's hard to add something that would also disturb your routine. So when you're talking about participating in a trial, like Shauna was saying, it may not be the most convenient thing to pick up and have to go back and forth to a clinic to get your labs checked and things like that. And that's one of the things that I kind of appreciate about the pandemic, is that we've learned to do things virtually. So even if we can add maybe video visits to clinical trials, that would be great. But I think there are just little things that we don't think about, like childcare and participation and the cost of parking to get to that institution. So that's something that we have to work together to figure out. And I think that that's why opportunities like this is so important, because we get to bring all the stakeholders at the table and figure out how to best serve this community.
Great. I think you both brought up the issues around structural racism in the medical world and how that has impacted so significantly on the lives of people living with sickle cell disease. And as a medical community, we have a long way to go to overcome that structural racism, but at least we're talking about it. And I think that's the first step. So I'm hopeful. And on speaking about being hopeful, the final question here is about what's happened in the last few years. There have been sickle warriors who have participated in clinical trials, and because of that, we have several new therapies, and there are just a lot more in the pipeline for people living with sickle cell disease. And so I was hoping that both of you, Tiana first, could talk a little bit about what you make of this moment.
Absolutely. Well, just as a patient and as an advocate, I'm so excited. I think that this is something, I can't even say that I've dreamed of this, where we have pharmaceutical companies who are actively engaging with this community and bringing patients and caregivers to the table to have these types of discussions around clinical trial participation, and just knowing that there are more treatments available and more being worked on. And I think that's speaks to this new energy that I feel, and like a new sense of urgency, because for so long this community has felt ignored and overlooked. So just the fact that, you know, we have all of these things being worked on, I think the community is starting to actually feel valued. And I'm excited for not just the generations to come, but even me right now, knowing that there are things being worked on and new treatments that just got approved. So I'm just excited.
So I would say that this is it's a truly exciting time. I remember before I was approached about participating in a clinical trial, I had just had my third baby and applied to become to use hydroxyurea, and was denied hydroxyurea. And that was the only thing that was available. That was all, except for participating in clinical research. And so those were my two options. I say that to say 10 years later, 11 years later, there are many new things that are available, 4 treatments available, approved treatments available, many treatments in the pipeline, over 235 clinical research programs that are available to the sickle cell disease community. And it is exciting, it's amazing. But although there is this excitement, although, you know, we have organizations who are working, and very brilliant people who are coming up with these amazing research questions to solve these issues, to help people live better lives with sickle cell disease, there is still a lot of work to be done. We still need to make sure that we are involving people who are living with sickle cell disease, involving them early and intimately in the design process for these clinical trials, so that we can make sure that these organizations who are spending all of this, these all of this money to develop these programs and spending their time to develop this research, we want to make sure that they are enrolling successfully and they are retaining enrollment and they are meeting their endpoints. That is true success. Enrollment, retaining enrollment, and meeting endpoints, because that's how we answer the questions and that's how we truly help people live better lives with sickle cell disease. And with that, there are so many options available for curative therapies now, but we need to work to make sure that these curative therapies are widely available, affordable, and accessible for the broader community. If I had something that I could say to the clinical researchers, it would be to make sure that your inclusion and exclusion criteria is accurately reflects, the ability to have as many able-bodied people living with sickle cell disease as possible in these programs, and find ways to make them available and accessible to people. There are so many people out there who are well enough to participate in these programs, but they can't afford them. So that is true success. But ultimately, I'm really excited that we're here. Like Tiana said, the community feels valued. They're being included in these discussions. Everybody has a seat at the table. And that given, where we are with COVID, or how far we've come from a year ago until now, virtual technology has made it so that even those who weren't able to, to physically make it to these conventions and programs and meetings, that they're able to connect virtually. So there's so many amazing things happening, but there's a lot to be done.
Well, I think you said that so well, that it is really, really an exciting time, but that there's so much work to do. And that concludes today's conversation. I really want to thank you both, Shauna and Tiana, for your participation and really sharing your stories and your lives with all of us. It's really important. And thanks for everyone who's joined us. We just skimmed the surface today, but there's much more to the story. Visit the American Society of Hematology RC website to learn more about what we're doing and how you can get involved. We'll soon be releasing a report that Shauna helped put together on what we've learned about clinical trials and people living with sickle cell disease and their participation. Be sure to keep an eye out on American Society of Hematology's RC's social media for more information about the upcoming American Society of Hematology podcast, Bringing Sickle Cell Disease to Life. Thank you.